When my father died, the house was quieter than I'd ever known it. It wasn't just silence. It was emptiness. The kind that wraps around your chest and squeezes until even breathing feels like betrayal. He'd been the strongest man I knew. A builder, an inventor, a dreamer. To the world, he was John Matthews, the local genius who struck gold with his patents. But to me, he was just Dad, the man who taught me that a promise was worth more than a fortune. The day of the will reading felt like stepping into a lion's den. My two half-brothers, Ethan and Kyle, were already there, wearing black suits, fake tears and smug smiles. They never cared about Dad. They cared about his money. When the lawyer opened the envelope, the tension was so thick it could have snapped like glass. To Ethan and Kyle, the lawyer read, "I leave the estate, my cars, and my remaining bank accounts, valued at $22 million. They both gasped, grinned, even hugged each other. Then their eyes turned to me, the forgotten son, the quiet one who never fit into their perfect designer world. And to my youngest, Daniel, the lawyer continued, I leave my old laptop." The room exploded in laughter. Kyle slapped his knee. "Are you serious?" "The old laptop?" Ethan smirked. "Guess you got the short end, little brother." I didn't respond. I just stared at that faded silver laptop sitting in the corner of Dad's desk, the one he never let anyone touch. It wasn't about the money. It was about what it meant. That laptop was the last thing he ever worked on, but I'll admit it. Walking out of that mansion with nothing but that old dusty laptop while my brothers celebrated their millions. It broke me for weeks. I couldn't sleep. I replayed the will over and over in my mind, wondering if Dad had lost faith in me, until one night. I decided to turn the laptop on. The screen flickered, slow and dim. It was password protected, and of course it was. I tried birthdays, anniversaries, everything I could think of. Nothing worked. Then I remembered something Dad used to say. The key to everything important is in what people overlook. I tried typing my own name. Daniel. The screen unlocked. The next morning, I confronted them. We met at a cafe, neutral ground. They were still celebrating their inheritance. Ethan wore a gold watch. Kyle was bragging about a beach house in Florida. When they saw me walk in, their laughter dimmed. "Here comes the laptop boy." Kyle sneered. "Need a charger?" I didn't smile. I slid a printed email across the table. Their faces went pale. It was one of the documents from Dad's laptop. Proof of money laundering under their names. Ethan's jaw clenched. "Where'd you get this?" I looked straight into his eyes. "Dad left it for me." They exchanged a glance and cold. Calculating. "Delete it," Ethan whispered. "You don't know what you're dealing with." But I did. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the quiet one anymore. Over the next few days, I dug deeper. The more I uncovered, the darker it got. There were offshore accounts, hidden partners, and even government contracts my brothers had falsified. Dad had been planning to expose them, but before he could, his car accidentally went off the highway. Now I wasn't sure it was an accident. I made a copy of everything. Then one evening there was a knock at my door. Two men in black suits stood there. "Daniel Matthews?" "Yes." "We're with the FBI. We'd like to ask you some questions about your father's company." My stomach dropped. They already knew. I handed them the laptop. One agent connected a drive, scanned through the folders. His eyes widened. "Sir," he muttered to his partner, "we've been looking for this for months. Turns out Dad had been helping the FBI build a case against my brothers. He'd gathered enough proof to expose an entire corruption ring connected to their business partners. That laptop wasn't just inheritance. It was evidence. The agents thanked me and left, but not before one said quietly, "Your father was a good man. He wanted justice and not revenge." Within weeks, it was everywhere. Headlines, news reports, financial scandals. Matthews Brothers under federal investigation. $22 million seized in fraud case. They lost everything. The mansions, the cars, the companies, all frozen. I watched on TV as they were led away in handcuffs. Kyle glared at the cameras. Ethan bowed his head. Part of me wanted to feel triumphant, but all I felt was hollow. Because Dad hadn't just left me proof. He'd left me a test, ran to see what I would do with it. Weeks later, I went back to the laptop. One folder remained unopened. Legacy. Inside, there was only one document. A letter. My son, if you've come this far, you've already done more than I ever hoped. I knew what your brothers were doing. I knew the risk of exposing them. But I also knew the heart you carry. I couldn't trust anyone else with this, not the courts, not my lawyers. Only you. You see, real inheritance isn't gold, property, or money. It's integrity. What you do when no one's watching. That's the measure of a man. If you're reading this, I want you to rebuild. Not for revenge, but for redemption. There's another file in the hidden drive. It holds the prototype for my final invention. I wanted to build a foundation for young engineers. Make it happen, son. That I broke down. For the first time since his death, I truly cried, because I realized he'd never stop believing in me. That old laptop didn't just destroy corruption. It built my destiny. My heart skipped. There were only 3 folders on the desktop. One for you, 2, don't trust them. Fair's evidence. I froze. I opened for you. Inside was a single video file titled My Son. I clicked play. Dad appeared. Frail. Sitting at his desk, his eyes heavy but full of love. If you're watching this, Danny, he began, then I'm gone. And I need you to listen carefully. Your brothers, they're not who you think they are. I tried to protect them, to guide them. But greed runs deep. What they took from me and what they'll soon take from you is beyond what you can imagine. My throat tightened. That laptop you're holding, it holds the truth. But it's not just files, Daniel. It's proof. Proof of what they've done and what they'll do next. The video ended. I sat frozen for what felt like hours. Then I opened the second folder. Don't trust them. It was full of emails, contracts, and confidential documents. Evidence of fraud, theft, and offshore accounts under my brothers' names. They had stolen from Dad's company for years. They'd been draining millions behind his back, and Dad, he'd found out. That's when I understood. He didn't leave me the laptop because it was worthless. He left it because it was everything. After the trials, silence returned to my life, but this time it wasn't the kind that suffocates. It was the kind that waits. The FBI took the laptop for investigation, but before they did, I copied the last folder Dad mentioned, the hidden drive. Inside was a single compressed file, password locked again. I thought maybe it was more evidence, maybe more secrets. But when I finally cracked the password, Promise Keeper, I found something completely different. Design blueprints, patent drafts, a full business plan for something called Project Phoenix, Dad's final invention. It wasn't just a machine. It was a revolutionary eco-efficient battery system, small, affordable, and designed to power homes in underdeveloped areas. Dad wasn't trying to make another fortune. He was trying to give the world light. That's when I knew what I had to do. The inheritance war had left me with nothing. No mansion, no cars, no savings. But I had a laptop, a dream, and my father's name, so I started small. A rented garage, second-hand tools, and a single goal, to finish what he started. At first, everyone thought I'd lost my mind. "You're wasting your time, Daniel," my cousin said. "Your father's gone. Let it go," but I couldn't. Every screw I tightened, every circuit I soldered, it felt like I was talking to him, and I heard his words echo in my head. Integrity builds where greed destroys. For months I worked day and night. Sometimes I'd fall asleep on the cold floor with blueprints spread around me like a blanket of hope. There were nights I didn't eat, mornings I couldn't afford electricity. Ironic. since I was building something to give it away. But slowly, painfully, I made progress. And just when I started to lose faith again, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from the lawyer who'd read the will months earlier. He wrote, "Your father established a trust fund, locked until federal clearance. Due to the recent closure of the investigation, it's been released to your name. Total balance $3.2 million. I dropped the letter. Dad had planned everything. He knew his fortune would be seized from the corrupt. So he hid a portion quietly, in a trust no one could touch but me. I knelt on that cold floor and whispered, 'Thank you, Dad.' And that's when Phoenix Energy Foundation was born. The foundation's mission was simple: provide affordable, renewable power solutions to communities in need. No investors, no corporate greed, just purpose. I hired a small team: engineers, dreamers, people who'd lost faith in big corporations but still believed in good. We worked for months. Then the first prototype came to life, a small, sleek battery capable of powering an entire home for a week. We named it the Phoenix Core. At our first presentation, half the audience left halfway through. Investors laughed. "Cute idea," one said, "but no real market." I smiled and replied, "This isn't for the market. It's for the world." That video went viral. Millions watched. Donations poured in, and within a year, we had installations in villages across South America, Africa, and rural Asia. Each time I saw a child flip a switch and watch light fill their home for the first time, I felt Dad's presence. But peace never stays untested. 2 years later, I got a letter from Ethan. He was being released early. Good behavior. Kyle, too. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part wanted to face them. When we met, they looked nothing like the men I remembered. Gone were the designer suits and arrogance. In their place were two broken figures carrying regret heavier than chains. Ethan spoke first. "Danny, I'm sorry, I waited." He continued, voice trembling. "I lost everything. The money, the fame, even my family. I thought Dad was just controlling us, but now I understand." Kyle's eyes filled with tears. "We laughed at you. We called you names, and you saved us. You could have destroyed us completely, but you didn't." I looked at them, two men who had caused me years of pain, and in that moment I realized something powerful. Revenge is easy. Forgiveness is strength. I took a deep breath and said, "You don't owe me anything. You owe him, Dad, a promise. Never betray your name again." They nodded, tears streaming. For the first time, we hugged. It wasn't perfect. It didn't erase the past, but it started the healing. Years passed. The foundation grew, but I never got rid of that laptop. One day I took it out again, dusty, worn, but still alive. When I powered it up, a message appeared I'd never seen before. "Congratulations, Daniel. You found the purpose. But there's one last gift." The screen flickered, and a new file appeared. Account access. Inside was an encrypted link and a message. "For the man who proved that integrity has a price." And he paid it willingly. I clicked it, and a new bank window opened. It was an offshore account, one I'd never seen before. Balance $22,000. I froze. He hadn't just taken it from them. He'd hidden it for me, for when I proved myself worthy. Tears filled my eyes. I whispered, "You clever old man." But this time I didn't keep the money for myself. I poured it into the foundation, expanding it worldwide. Because my father's legacy wasn't about wealth. It was about worth. 10 years later, I stood on a stage before a crowd of young innovators, people who reminded me of myself when I had nothing but a laptop and a dream. I told them the story of my father, of betrayal, of pain, of rediscovery. And when I ended, I said, "People will laugh when you choose principles over profit. They'll mock your faith when you hold on to integrity. But the truth always has a way of shining through, like light through the cracks." My father once told me a fortune can be stolen. A good name can't. So guard your name. Build with honesty. Because someday your old laptop, your values, your faith, might hold treasures the world can't measure. The audience stood and applauded, and I looked up smiling, knowing somewhere Dad was watching. Proud. Looking back, I realized something profound. When they laughed at me for that old laptop, they weren't just mocking me. They were mocking the idea that goodness still mattered in a greedy world. But that laptop, that symbol of patience, faith, and love, turned out to be more powerful than any inheritance. Because what's hidden inside our struggles often becomes the foundation of our greatest victories. If you're listening to this, remember, you might be walking through darkness right now. You might feel like the world took everything from you, but don't give up. Sometimes life gives you an old laptop, a gift that looks useless, meaningless, even cruel. But inside, if you have the courage to open it, you'll find your purpose. So don't chase fortune. Build faith. Don't crave applause. Seek integrity. Because when the lights fade and the laughter dies, the truth, your truth, is what will last. And maybe, just maybe, someone will tell your story someday of how you turned betrayal into purpose, pain into progress, and silence into a legacy that lit up the world. It's strange how the same people who once laughed at you eventually start asking for advice. When the story of Project Phoenix reached the news, the man who turned an old laptop into light for millions, I received calls from universities, global companies, even government programs. They wanted partnerships, patents, profits, but I remembered Dad's voice. Never trade your soul for a signature. So instead, I told them, you can join us, but not to make money, to make meaning. Some hung up. Some stayed. And those who stayed became family. We launched the Phoenix Scholarship, giving free education to underprivileged young inventors. We built labs where children could dream without limits. And every time a new student entered those doors, I'd tell them, everything you build here started from something the world thought was worthless. One evening, 10 years to the day since Dad's death, I drove back to our old home, the place where it all began. The paint was chipped, the garden overgrown, but the memory stood untouched. I found the same wooden desk where the lawyer had read the will, and there in the corner sat the laptop. Dustier now. The keys worn smooth, but when I ran my hand across it I felt warmth, like it still held his heartbeat. I opened it one last time. The desktop was blank now. No more secrets, no more mysteries. Only a single new folder appeared. Son. Inside, one text file. Enjoy your old laptop. I laughed through tears. That was the phrase my brothers had mocked me with. Their words dripping with greed and sarcasm. Now it was his voice reclaiming it, transforming their cruelty into a blessing. And below those words, one final line. If they laugh at your light, it only means they're still in the dark. I closed the lid gently, whispering, rest well, Dad. The light's still shining. Years later, my brothers found their way back into the world. Different men entirely. Ethan began teaching business ethics at a local college. Kyle volunteered at our foundation, designing affordable housing in the same villages that now glowed with Phoenix light. We never spoke much about the past. We didn't need to. Our actions said it all. Once during a conference, Kyle approached me holding a small metal chip in his hand. This was part of Dad's first prototype, he said quietly. I kept it all these years. I think he'd want you to have it, I smiled. No, brother. He'd want us to keep it. And in that simple moment I realized, healing isn't loud. It whispers through forgiveness. 15 years after my father's death, I stood before the United Nations Climate Summit. Delegates from over 100 countries filled the hall. Cameras flashed. They introduced me as Daniel Matthews, founder of Phoenix Energy, humanitarian innovator, and global advocate for ethical progress. I walked to the podium with the same laptop in my hands, repaired, polished, a relic of destiny. When I began to speak, the crowd went silent. 15 years ago, I inherited nothing but an old laptop. My brothers inherited millions. They laughed, and honestly, I can't blame them, because on the surface, it looked like they'd won. But inside this laptop were the blueprints to something more valuable than gold. The truth. The truth that integrity outlives fortune. The truth that legacy isn't written in wills, it's written in choices. I held up the laptop. This, I said, was supposed to be junk, but it became a bridge between who my father was and who I had to become. The hall erupted in applause, but I wasn't done. Somewhere right now there's another person being told they've been left with nothing. Maybe it's not money. Maybe it's just faith or a lesson or a scar. But if you look closer, if you open what life hands you, you might find more power than you ever dreamed possible. The applause turned into a standing ovation. Reporters called it the speech that lit the world. But for me, it was just a son speaking to his father through time. After the summit, I returned home, not to the mansion my brothers once owned, but to a small house by the ocean. I sat on the porch, listening to the waves, the laptop beside me. It had outlived empires, trials, and wars. The moon reflected off the metal surface, and I whispered, "We did it, Dad." In the distance, lightning flickered over the horizon, not a storm, but a reminder of the power that still lived in every spark of light. And in that moment I felt complete. Not rich. Not famous. Just whole. When I look back now, I don't remember the laughter of my brothers. I remember the silence after they left. The silence that forced me to listen to my own heart. I remember the humiliation that became my teacher. The betrayal that became my compass. The pain that became my purpose. I learned that sometimes the greatest blessings are wrapped in the ugliest disguises. That sometimes life takes everything from you, just so you can learn what truly matters. My father didn't give me money. He gave me meaning, and that meaning turned darkness into dawn. Years later, as I grew older, my foundation reached every continent. We'd lit millions of homes, trained thousands of engineers, and inspired countless hearts. Before retiring, I was invited to give one last speech to our new recruits, a new generation ready to carry the flame forward. I stepped onto the stage, holding the same old laptop, and began. I was once laughed at for inheriting this. They told me I'd been cheated and that I was left with nothing. But this old machine held more than money ever could. It held my father's soul, his wisdom, and his faith in me. I paused and smiled. So to anyone who feels overlooked, forgotten, underestimated, hear me. You don't need millions to matter. You don't need applause to have purpose. You just need courage. The kind that keeps going when no one believes. The room was silent. The kind of silence that listens. If life gives you an old laptop, open it. Inside might be your destiny. And when people laugh, let them. Because someday they'll see what was hidden inside your pain and your perseverance, your light. The crowd rose to its feet. I looked down at the laptop one last time and whispered, "Thank you, Dad, for giving me everything by giving me nothing." When they laughed, I felt small. When they left, I felt broken. But when I believed, I became unstoppable. Because pain doesn't destroy you, and it defines you. Betrayal doesn't end your story. It edits it. And love, the kind that survives death, writes the final chapter. So if you ever feel forgotten, remember this. Your old laptop and your burden, your heartbreak might be the key to a future brighter than any inheritance. Keep it. Open it. Learn from it. And someday when the world comes asking how you made it, you'll smile and say, "I just opened what everyone else threw away." Enjoy your old laptop, they laughed. But that old laptop changed the world.